this is not the rap in comics, a combining of culture panel. That's in our involved. Sorry, 2 doors down. I just want to make sure everyone's in the right place. This is actually Action Figure Insider presents the 90s. Everything old is new again. And I don't want everyone to think we're just, it's such a stickler to the decade. Because, while there is a resurgence of 90s things, I think we're all kids of the 70s and 80s as well. So we're gonna talk about all that stuff. It's all right. But it struck me, sort of the birth of this panel. I was watching the Toy Hunter show, and he started to coin the phrase "new classics" when talking about 90s toys, and that seemed troubling to me. It was suddenly like, oh yeah, all that stuff is like 20 years old now. That's crazy. So there's this whole other generation coming up that are now looking for that stuff. When we've been combing, antique shops and toy stores, for the stuff that we loved in the 70s and 80s and stuff. Now there's this whole other generation coming in looking for that. And these gentlemen are all toy makers. And they are starting to dabble in bringing some of those properties back because there is a resurgence of that and some nostalgia and some love of those properties. So I'm Daniel Pickett. I run ActionFigureInsider.com, and I am the host of the Geek Shall Inherit Podcast. And I'm going to have my guests introduce themselves and just tell us who you're with, and maybe just a couple of the properties that are with your company.
Can I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm Reis O'Brien. I work for Funko, and as a toy designer, I've worked on lots of nostalgic things like Ghostbusters and Goonies and all that good stuff. I'm probably going to talk about the 80s mostly today.
That's fine.
Sorry.
Alright, hey, I'm Jeff Trojan, currently working at Playmates Toys for the 3rd time. Started there in the early 90s, so when we start saying that everyone old is new again, I guess you're talking about people like us who 20 years ago started working on those new classics. In between Playmates Toys, I was up at Galoo, I was at DC Collectibles, I was at Play-Alongs, working on things like, let's go through it, Mutant Ninja Turtles, Star Trek, Simpsons, Exo Squad, the action figure realm, Laura Croft, Tomb Raider, Batman and Gang. Also did some Care Bears, Teletubbies, all that kind of wicked stuff. So, many things.
That's nice, yeah.
Hi, I'm Kevin Kiniry, Vice President of Creative Services with DC Entertainment. So part of my area of expertise is running the DC Collectibles business, which is a kind of niche toy and hobby collectible group featuring the DC Comics characters, so everything from the Justice League, Batman, Superman, all those guys. So currently, I think the reason why I'm on this panel may be our new line of Batman animated figures based off the old Batman animated series from the 90s.
Yeah.
That's a big thing for us.
Ramirez. I've been working with as a sculptor in the toy industry for 23 years. Worked on the original Ninja Turtles, Marvel Legends, a bunch of stuff for DC. I've worked for everybody. Been doing it forever.
Didn't you also work on some of the Toy Biz 5-inch, the pre-Marvel Legends stuff too?
Which stuff?
The Toy Biz 5-inch Marvel,
Oh, yeah,
the pre-Marvel Legends. Yeah.
Marvel Legends, yeah, I worked on all that stuff. All that stuff.
I'm Jeremy Stout. I'm one half of Spiral Creations. We're a very small little indie toy company. And really, we sort of have one foot in like the art toy world and one foot in we like to make stuff that we liked when we were kids. So we've done some homages to some 80s properties and stuff. But the reason I'm up here is because I've been buying way too many toys for the last 30 years.
And Jeremy loves the weird stuff.
I love the stuff that's like actually toys for kids, not like, oh, it's Star Wars and it's collectible. I'm like, maybe you bought Imaginext or like Pokemon and stuff, and they're like, what are you? No, it's kind of what I'm.
Did you have like a hamburger collection too? Like a toy hamburger?
I have a toy hamburger collection.
Yeah.
No, because it has to be an actual anthropomorphic like hamburger. So like Mayor McCheese.
Mayor McCheese.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, we were kind of, just before the panel started, we were talking about, there was kind of a shift for some of us, you know, where we were in high school or a little after, right around there, where we had been buying stuff and maybe it kind of slowed down a little. And right around '89, when that Michael Keaton Batman, Tim Burton Batman movie came out, suddenly it was cool again, and then it was mainstream, which is something we never had. You know, we were still kind of like I think Phil said, just kind of like treating it like drug deals, like going to the toy store, like I hope no one sees me, you know, no one from my high school sees me. And that suddenly was just like everyone, there were like posters, there were T-shirts, and it was just suddenly, and then like it was Star Trek: The Next Generation came on around that time, and suddenly there was sort of a tectonic shift of more people joining us in the stuff that we already love. So can you sort of talk about what you remember of the transition of the 80s and 90s and what you were collecting and kind of what you were into, and was it cool for you or not, or were you open? Were you just not telling girls, or not telling your partners? Not, you know, just how did that work?
I didn't tell anybody. I was a closet toy collector.
That's some people were.
So yeah, I learned a hard lesson around middle school when we discovered skateboards and guitars that I should probably stop going to Toys R Us. And I was okay, you know, but even when I was like 19, 20 years old, I started going back into Toys R Us, like sneaking in. I tried to come up with a reason, you know, and, oh, I need a bike helmet. And you wouldn't actually figure it out, you're just like, oh, it's pretty rad, you know. And then, yeah, I started, I guess around the early Toy Biz Marvel line. It was that Wolverine, this was my gateway drug. That Wolverine that had the mask
The
took
ring?
off and the ring. Yeah,
The ring mask? Yeah.
And I was like, oh God, I gotta have that. And I bought it, and I remember I had like 2 roommates, and I went home, and they were like, hey dude, what up? And I was like, nothing. Nothing, guys, just go watch video games. And then I like went in and like snuck it under my bed, and every now and then I take it out, look.
Retract the claws,
Yeah,
little spring claws.
you know,
Put them in at the elbows.
Yeah.
They have these weird spring claws.
Right.
Yeah.
And then around that time, I kind of stopped hanging around like wannabe rock stars and skateboard professionals, and I started hanging around dudes I met at my comic shop and stuff, and I realized that there was this whole world out there where people weren't like freaking out about it so much, so I felt less persecuted.
Sure.
Let me just say that if you guys haven't been to a convention like 20 years ago, look to your left, look to your right. There are girls here. Conventions, and they're not moms
bringing their kids.
Moms that are like pissed off.
Yeah.
In the 80s and 90s, my God, it was a sweaty sausage fest with like just 40-year-old dudes. And like now that I am a 40-year-old dude, I look around at like the young single nerds. I'm like, dude, you guys are in heaven.
You guys
Do
are
not understand how lucky you are. Yeah.
So thank you, ladies.
Trojan Toy Stories.
Yeah.
I think I can tell about 2 of them. One was when I was 11. I'd seen Star Wars and wasn't really big into toys or anything like that. And I loved Star Wars. My folks, I think told my grandparents that I liked Star Wars. So in that first year, must have been the second year, because we began in the first year, they got me all 10. My grandparents got me all 10 of the Star Wars action figures. And I opened up the one, and I'm not, what the hell am I going to do with these? Then I collected all of them for the next 5 years or so, well into high school and things like that, because I had to have them all. So that kind of started one little toy collection phase. And then I get things like Micronauts or whatever, and all the cool, fun Japanese toys. I started taking them all apart, see how they worked and things like that, and trashing everything and reassembling them. So that kind of started one part of the brain going, which led down this path. Fast forward many years later, I actually did go to school and study hard and go to college and things like that, until I flunked out of architecture school. But in architecture school, one thing happened. Mattel came through and did a toy design competition. And it interested me, did really place well in that, and flunked out of architecture. Went back into real estate development business school at Arizona, and said, you know what, as far as architecture goes, I'll just hire architects and things like that, because I can't draw worth crap. But I always kept walking through the toy aisles, paying attention to what was cool. When I was in business school in Southern California, a lady from Mattel came through, and she started asking questions of crap, and I pretty much knew every answer. Who made this in the toy business? Who did that? When this product came out? And then she brought me into an internship at Barbie. So I got there through just kind of getting an MBA and knowing a lot about toys, because I just stuck my face in it for a lot of years. And my basic business career, toy business career, has been a frustrated designer who flunked out of architecture school. I still can't draw worth crap. when the designers send their stuff in, I'm the evil business guy who scribbles on it and says, no, I want it more like this. Fix it. So I now hire designers, but I still can't draw with crap. So that's my career in the toy business.
All right.
So for me, as we talk about, like, we were talking about this outside too, that age of, I guess I was so naive being a kid, because I clearly remember the conversation my dad had to have with me at 13, where I had handed in my Christmas list, and there was toys on the entire list, and he said, no, you're done, like, this is it, you're now the age where you don't ask for toys. And it was like, I didn't understand. No, the list on the list. And I think at the time I was obsessed with like Masters of the Universe or something like that, and it's very much like inappropriate, I guess, for that age to be asking for so much toys. And there was a part of me that would always be this toy fan because I didn't care, like, especially when your dad is like saying no. I was like, no, yes. So I just found other ways around it. So like, okay, I know that Christmas maybe I'm not going to get any of that stuff, and I would save up a little bit of money, or I would start getting part-time jobs and save the money, and then just go myself, pick up the toy, and there would just be more in the collection. And you know how parents are, they don't pay attention to what you really have. They don't know. All of a sudden there was just more of it, and he didn't really know that I continued. I mean, we're talking about high school, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And so there's always a love for that there. But the other like story idea I had when we were talking about the 90s that just came to me was, because one of the big things in the 90s was Power Rangers. It was huge, right? So I'm, again, way too old to be involved in Power Rangers in any way, shape, or form. But I clearly remember being in college, so again, way too old, watching some late night TV show at 2 in the morning that showed the original pre-Power Rangers, whatever it was called, I forget what it was called, but it was the actual Japanese show with the Japanese actors, and it was so trippy. And it was a bunch of college kids drinking, watching this crazy show, like a Teletubbies episode. And I was like, this is crazy, but the robot thing, and they're giant, they do all this stuff, that's awesome, so we should make toys of that. And it was like 2 years later, so all of a sudden it became like this kids program, it was everywhere, and they, shoehorned the American actors into it. I was like, wait, can I imagine all that? So, like, the fact that, like, again, the story is I'm way too old to be loving toys. That's really the end of the story.
Do you remember, did you get any toys that Christmas?
No, no, nothing. And that was really that was the growing up that I had to do, I guess, was to realize that sometimes you have to do it yourself. That's what I learned.
That same thing, I was always buying toys, always loved toys. And from 13 on, I just kind of had to sneak around and buy them myself because my parents wouldn't do it. There was no purchasing toys for me anymore. So I always had a job, and I always spent my money on toys. And I got lucky because I only had to like sneak around until I was about 18, where I actually got a job working for Ramirez Studios, working with this guy doing Turtles and Disney premiums and stuff like that. Just lucked out. So my closet and collecting was only really about a solid 4 years.
You're lucky.
Yeah,
You're very lucky.
Oh, yes, yeah.
I must be the luckiest of all. I think my mom was just an enabler. She was like, let's see, you don't do drugs, you didn't drink, not back then I didn't drink, and you're not out committing crimes, you just want to buy toys. And she's like, okay, better than anything else you can get up to. So.
My dad was the opposite. He was like, aren't you out drinking?
I'm 16, don't wreck a car. Dad, this is new superpowers. Well, I remember in the late 80s, I was a big fan of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic, the Eastman Laird comic, and I taught myself how to draw those, and I drew them all the time in high school. And then when the cartoon came out, there were people in my high school like, oh my gosh, that's that thing you draw, did you create that? Yes, that's totally mine, totally mine. Yeah. You won't be seeing me here tomorrow.
Do you remember the lead miniatures that they did of the Teenage Mutant Ninja
I do,
Turtles?
yeah.
I was waiting for toys.
Yeah.
I had all those.
You still have those?
Oh man, they're probably somewhere.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's pretty awesome. Yeah, the 90s had a lot of kind of weird stuff too. It started, there was that sort of thrust of everything had to be extreme. There was like extreme G.I. Joe where they lost all their articulation, they were buff, and that was sort of the time where all the weapons became gigantic, so that they could still fire a missile and not choke anyone. So everyone had this sort of really big accessory.
It's from the 70s.
There was the Total Justice figures. They had such strange sort of sculpted musculature. It's almost like they'd been stripped of their skin and stuff.
And they were always flexing. They were like the veiniest Batman you've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. And then scales kind of started to go kind of haywire too. So it was kind of started creeping up, kind of the 3 3/4 inch to 4 inch to 5 inch, a couple of 6 inch, and that sort of thing. And there was just sort of no thought as to, oh, well, this can go with this anymore. We just sort of had like all these kind of crazy different styles and scales, and then also there was sort of there was the original video game boom with the Atari 2600, and that cooled down, and then you started getting, the Nintendo started to rise again, and that was kind of a shift. And now there's people making toys of that stuff, Randy, who's not here, is starting to make a lot of things that, are like repainted properties that they have like Predator and stuff like that, but in that sort of 16-bit paint scheme, which is, kind of fun and crazy, but also sort of bringing it back to that. But then you started to get other things like Tamagotchi, where they're putting electronics into the toys. So any of you guys that were making toys back then, do you remember any sort of stories of, not that you had like a big cigar smoking boss with someone coming in, hey, you know what the kids love these days? Do you have any of that?
Veins. Can we all agree as toy designers to let's not let that old thing become new again?
Yeah.
Let's just all agree we're not going to do vein flexing, guys.
Actually, this isn't quite the vein thing, although the vein thing was very prevalent through the Total Justice line, obviously. And that was, a lot of it was the 90s comic art got crazy, with everybody being like that. But I'll never forget when I first started at DC and I was going through some old files that we had in this whole 90s section, and I opened up this drawer, and it was a lost style guide. The style guide is basically a book of artwork that licensees use to make product, and it was all based around the 1994 Olympics. It was all of the heroes doing different Olympic events. And it's exactly what you think of it. Ridiculous. And talk about like 90, and they were all super like big and muscly too. And they're running track and they're doing the pole vault, and it's like crazy Summer Olympics with the DC heroes.
Were they all sort of USA based, or did they play off other characters?
No, it was definitely USA all the way. It was like they had flags, and it was like it was crazy.
Oh, I think that needs to be a subline. I think like
That hasn't come back.
No, not even.
You don't think so?
The Turtles did the Olympics too.
Right, everybody was there.
The Turtles did everything.
You know, like the Laugh Olympics crossover where they all come together for the Olympics. So
Oh, that would be amazing.
Apollo 13 Turtles, those were good.
Turtles not only did everything, they spawned so many knockoffs. Like anything, it was literally like a word game. They're like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So let's pick 2 adjectives and an animal. And make it.
Cowboys of the Mesa,
Yeah.
Biker Mice
I worked with those.
Yeah.
You worked on Biker Mice?
From Warner did I did a couple of them.
Anthropomorphic animals.
Yeah. There was kind of a strange, that was sort of the black and white explosion in comics too. And they started doing all the knockoffs of that. There was like the geriatric jujitsu gerbils.
Cold-blooded Chameleon Commandos.
Yeah.
And
There was a pachyderm one. There were elephants.
Adolescent something.
adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters.
I actually
Almost flunked out of high school, kids. That's what I remember.
I bought all of those issues, and I still have them. And last time I was home for Christmas, I dug them out of all the long boxes back at my folks' house and took pictures because I knew the Ninja Turtles movie was coming out. So I'm gonna have to write a blog with all the covers of those in the next week or so. Did you guys have any favorite sort of '90s properties, things that you collected or picked up or worked on?
I don't know. That's a dark period.
It wasn't all dark though.
It wasn't too bad. I guess I got excited around was it 96 when they started doing the Power of the Force?
Yes.
Star Wars. I was just happy to see Star Wars again.
Yeah. They were extreme too.
Dude, there was weightlifting Luke and like monkey face Leia.
Tom's like his tails were showing through his shirt.
Man, it was just like I swear the Lando had a bulge. It was inappropriate, but I got really excited about those. I was just kind of happy to see Star Wars back. So I collected all those and they're worth nothing now.
But you worked so hard for them too, though.
Oh yeah, dude, I was like that guy. Like, oh, Target's about to open. I hope they have the Boba Fett with the half a circle.
Do the time that walk, you know, so you're not running. Like
Trying to
elbow it.
Yeah.
What's nice is when back in those days when you were like really hunting for toys and you were that guy that right before a store opens and you're like, oh, look at all these other dudes. But then when you realize that like 90% of them turn down the Hot Wheels aisle, you're like, oh, good.
What were you going to say?
Same time period, one I liked from the 90s, Exo Squad.
Yeah.
You know, cartoon show didn't get picked up too widely, and quality animation wasn't what you did today. But there was a lot of great story to it. This entire space opera kind of, the writers were cribbing a lot of what the big Japanese epic operas were like. There was great backstory to that. So we did a nice robotic line for us in a couple of years. But I was really happy with the storytelling in that. You know, I saw Transformers come back. I'm like, someone please do something incredible with Exo Squad.
Yeah.
Take it back to its original outline, its original roots.
Maybe Michael Bay would like to take us.
And those are really well done. I mean, I
Good
remember.
engineering of the toys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Exo Squad and Gargoyles, I thought.
Oh,
yeah. Those two shows, if they were today, they'd have a huge following. They kind of fell into the black hole because they were too mature, it was episodic, and people just did not get it at the time.
Yeah, if you guys didn't watch Gargoyles, I think they just put them all up on Netflix now, so you can watch all of them. Yeah. So that was a great show. Just a great mythology, really great designs, and the toys came out really, really well, you know, for translating it from 2D to 3D or something.
And Disney had never really targeted like a boys properly. Like, I mean, the whole gender thing in toys is such a big deal. And Power Rangers in the 90s was a huge thing because it hit. Girls loved it, you know, because there were girls who weren't like, oh, save me. It was like, I'm going to be the Pink Ranger and beat up some monster. So the toys, it was like this huge demand. And then initially, after the action figures sold through, they're like, oh, we'll make Barbie versions because that's what girls want, right? It's like, no, they just want action toys like toys. And it led to this huge boom in the Tomb Raider. And that changed because we grew up with female action figures. They don't sell. We'll make like one ugly Princess Leia, and that's it.
Yeah.
But I think Power Rangers was a big part of changing that on Funko.
Yeah. Boy, do you remember those? They made 2 scales of Power Rangers when they first came out. There were the
Giant
8-inch ones?
8-inch ones.
But then there were those little ones where their heads would flip around, but they all had like a uniform, like barrel chest. You know, they were the exact same figure, just repainted with a different head.
That was like the birth of sort of Bandai America. They have all these great toys in Japan, and then they were like, oh yeah, they took that show and like dubbed it half in English and filmed it out behind Toys R Us in Culver City. And like everyone loves it. We need toys now. So they took like, well, what molds do we got? Well, we got these 8-inch things, we got some things with bikes. Just make it. And that first line was like so patchwork and crazy. Like, why would you have an 8-inch Ranger for a Zord and he's like bigger than the robot? But they were like, we just needed something. And I think they raided their tooling and they were just like, just make it. Those triangle box, crazy. We remember palms lining up at Toys R Us. It wasn't nerds at that point. And there was no eBay.
I want to know,
Right.
who was the first toy guy that went, you know what this hero needs? A motorcycle. It's just like, so those date back to the 70s.
From Evil days, I think.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense.
Everybody needed a motorcycle.
Yeah, but they had like, you know, the Hulk 4x4.
Flash, it's a motorcycle.
I really need to go fast. Thank God my motorcycle's nearby.
Yeah, I mean, there's vehicles that make sense, but then it just seemed like, you know, and especially we saw that kind of back in the 70s, especially like with the old rack toys that you find in the, you know, in the 5 and dime sort of thing. We're just like, there's a laser pistol, put Starsky and Hutch on that, you know, just slap the stick around it, put a little bit of artwork and, you know, go to town.
Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah.
Done. Dukes
Exactly,
of Hazzard
that's
lightsaber.
right. And you see the same sort of thing, just, you know, with all these different brandings on it. And for some of those things, that was all you were getting from that property, with these sort of weird rack toy sort of things. But yeah, then it was just like, oh, well, there's, you know, let's put Dr. Doom in his Doom buggy. You know,
The Spider-Mobile.
the Spider-Mobile, yeah. And Toy Biz started to get kind of weird in the 90s, but they had like those 12-inch Spider-Man where he's like fishing.
What's actually on sale?
Yeah, he was wearing like waders and stuff, but he was playing like softball with his mask on.
That's right. Yeah, it was a fishing spider.
There was a fishing Spider-Man, I didn't make that up.
I'm gonna go on the floor and look for it tomorrow. Somebody's got it for like $12.
Yeah.
Somebody bought farmer turtles with tractors and everything.
Oh, yeah, I remember Turtles.
Oh, man, that's my time.
Were you in on that meeting?
I know. Before my time.
Farmer Turtles, that's just, yeah, those sort of combinations are just like,
Selling Middle America.
Again.
Walmart exclusive.
Again, can I just agree not to let that come to it?
Throw it out there.
I feel like we're talking about all this stuff we're glad is gone.
But as we get older and more senile, it turns awesome. Like, when I look at Farmer Michelangelo, I wouldn't buy that. I collect Michelangelos, just Michelangelos.
right.
And hamburger.
Sumo Michelangelo.
Hamburger Michelangelo.
Caveman one, with the dinosaur right
Yeah.
on it.
But isn't that sort of what we were like talking about, this resurgence is hopefully we've learned from the past, and these new versions are the idealized versions of what we think we were getting then, maybe.
Romanticized versions.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's an interesting shift because I feel like most of us were sort of kids of the 70s and mainly the 80s, and we buy a lot of crap. Like, that was our generation. It's like stuff. And the 90s kids, I feel like, are a little different. Like, I talked to dealers who do the Power Morphicon in LA, it's like a Power Rangers convention, and they're always like, just a lot of stuff. And this is a guy who's got Japanese Power Ranger stuff, like all kinds of things. Like, oddly, not as much as you think, because the 90s kids, like, they're really into autographs, they're really into cosplay, and it's like, it's slightly different. Because I feel like all of us who are like 80s kids, like, we just like stuff. The 80s fan, the 90s fan, I think, a little bit different. So there's that shift, I think, as people who make things, like, you gotta, I always look at the daily t-shirt sites, you know, like T-Fury and those
Yeah.
$10 t-shirts. That's a really good gauge on what is coming back. 'Cause,
Sure.
like, if you looked over the last year, like, you see like Sailor Moon, you know, Pokemon, Power Rangers, like, if the 90s stuff is showing up, you don't see as many He-Man shirts as you used to, G.I. Joe shirts.
Well, we've kind of run into that at Funko because Funko started as a nostalgia company with bobbleheads. And, you know, nobody bought bobbleheads in ages, and then when Funko started, they were like, "Hey, maybe we should try this bobblehead thing," and it worked. People like it's lightning struck, and people felt nostalgic about the actual form factor itself. And then for a while there, they were like making bank off of like old ad characters, you know, like
Yeah.
Captain Crunch and Ronald McDonald and stuff like that. And
Look, obscure ones too, like
Oh, sure.
Outback Steakhouse kangaroo.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Outback Steakhouse had it.
but the problem is nowadays we have found just because you know sensibilities are changing, the generation is changing. The '90s kids didn't really have that connection with ad characters like we did, meaning old dudes like me, and so those started to they have absolutely gone to the wayside, and now we're starting to see things like, you know, it breaks my heart, but like He-Man and Skeletor, it's like, well, you know, it's like they're kind of going away, and then all of a sudden these Power Rangers are really hot, and all of a sudden, so it's great. So I find myself being one of the older guys, I tend to look at our younger employees who are like around 24 and up, and I kind of go, so hey guys, what was like super hot when you were 8 years old? And you know, they're like, cat dog. I'm like, okay. I'm gonna draw a cat dog pop, you know. But that's what you got to do in business too. You got to move with the market, especially if you're kind of selling nostalgia.
Well, and one of the worries I know I have when I think about that stuff is as we get into these generations that are kind of looping around every 10, 20 years, I think you find that because media is so much more diverse now, there's not a shared experience the way that there was from the 80s, was probably the last decade, to really truly say, like, we all watched Gilligan's Island. That's all that was on the 4 channels that we had to watch. And so you can meet somebody around, maybe not, internationally as much, but in the United States, you could live on separate coasts and have the same childhood experience. And now, like, I remember very clearly in the 80s when cable became big, and all of a sudden there were hundreds of channels, and you just started watching other things, and now shows don't get a life more than a season or 2, and then they're off and on, and they don't go into syndication where they're like shoved down your throat. So as much as I love the options and choice, you later don't have that nostalgic feeling for the same thing in a large way, and it's coming soon where it's going to be harder and harder.
Yes, I agree.
Everything is niche now. Like, it used to be mainstream, like we all listened to Michael Jackson. We all watched the Smurfs, but now it's like everybody, you have internet video and Netflix and cable and this guy's into Bravest Heroes, and that guy likes Adventure Time.
Like, pick and choose what you want. Yeah.
The 80s kids, like, we all would be like, you throw out an 80s property, either we'd be like, oh, we love that, or oh, we hate it, we all knew it.
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting in that same vein is not just the fragmentation of pop culture, is that as you start tracking kids who are from the 90s, kids who are from the 2000s or whatever, what did you do to play? What did you do to buy? What reminds you of your childhood? A lot of those things are going to be digital. You played video games, you played with apps, you bought music as an MP3, you didn't buy an album or anything like that. So there is a certain itch to scratch. It's like, I want to get one of those because I never got it when I was a kid, or my friend had it, or I had it, I wanted to get it and give to my children. But when you grow up and when people are 8 years old and 10 years old, they're playing with something digital. How do you collect that later? It's going to be a whole different dynamic from us 3D guys.
Nothing's happening.
Yeah, that's
Phone
right.
never happened,
Yeah.
other than the phone.
3 words, Flappy Bird pop.
I'm on it. I'm on it.
I think another kind of shift too is, those of us that collected Star Wars figures, there was the idea that you had to collect them all. And even if you didn't have them, you wanted them all. But there's been sort of a shift now with, they just want their favorite ones. It's not that I have to have every member of the cast, in plastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, yeah. That's true for some people. There are completists out there.
Right,
they still exist, but it's more the older generation, I agree. Younger people, I don't know, I wonder if like 20 years from now, if there's going to be like nostalgic apps. Like, you guys made this look like it came out on the iPhone 5. Remember how old that was before they were actually in your brain?
You play this Pac-Man on your phone.
I do play this Pac-Man on my
Yeah,
iPad. Yeah, you're right.
The second we can get the Jack's plug and play the Turner Key and the Kiniry. Every single one of those.
Yeah.
That was our generation.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Yeah. That gentleman has a question.
I might be the oldest guy in the room. And when I grew up in the 60s, action figures they were subtle, they were off on the edges.
Sure.
I've spent my career in visual effects and design for films and that sort of thing. And the thing that I noticed, because I care about this stuff, is there was a period of time, you guys would be able to tell me better than I could tell you, when action figures went to another level.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and you tell me, I'm an observer,
Right.
so I only come to it.
Summer of 1978.
Not as an observer and all
We
that.
went from 12-inch to 4 because of the wood prices.
But when Todd went farther,
Yeah, that was the other switch.
when
was the farm.
he did what he did,
Mhm.
based on the characters that he designed, and the kind of quality that he designed into his characters, that was I'm guessing, an entirely different paradigm shift.
No, I would agree with that.
Now, I was beyond that, but I noticed it.
Yeah.
And it was intense, and it was heartfelt, and it was business, and he did amazing business
Yeah.
because of it. And I guess my question would be to you guys, how did that affect you? Because I'm thinking there's 15 years, maybe 20, between you and me.
Right.
And so tell me, what did that, I know what the Beatles did when they came to America. They changed everything.
Well, first of all, I would hate to admit that Todd McFarlane is my Beatles.
He'll tell you that, though.
He will tell you that. He's John and Ringo.
But what I want to hear from you guys is exactly that. I want to hear you say, did he matter? Did he not matter?
He absolutely mattered. You're right. That's a good assessment. Like I said, when I was that age, I was reading Spawn and all that stuff when the whole Marvel, images, when, just speaking for me, but I felt like it was kind of industry-wide. When we first saw those Spawn figures come out, jaws started kind of dropping, and that's kind of when I went like full Monty, and I was just like, I'm a toy collector.
Yeah.
Like,
That was about 95, right?
Yeah. Like I was sold, and
Credit where it is. The first revolution you talked about, I think we all ended, that it was Star Wars, was a commercial success.
Yeah.
But all the toys produced to that date were commercial. Manufactured somewhat cheaply, designed somewhat cheaply, efficiently. We talked about motorcycles from Obi-Wan Kenobi or whoever. Those were the commercial guys talking. We were at Playmates in 92, 93, 94, and we were sometimes in the action figure magazines talked about as some of the guys having the most paint-offs of an action figure company that's out there in the Walmarts and Targets and companies that were around then, retailers that were around then, and doing portrait sculptures, having great sculptors like Varner and his guys, have great likenesses of actors and things like that, and cast them in different ways so it stayed that way through the manufacturing process. When Todd came out, he had a different, I'm sure, P&L than a lot of the larger toy companies.
What is P&L?
A profit and loss statement. He could afford, the tooling, the size of the figures, the decal on the figures, and not need to make as much money because he made his money in other areas.
he was buying $1 million baseballs.
Yes.
Oh, $3 million.
But credit where it is, first to Todd and his guys, but then everybody else. That started what I call the artistic phase. Because then sculpting got good. You like a tool a certain way, and paint a certain way. And again, I'm just a business guy, but we used all these outside guys and let them go nuts on the sculpture and the paint, and we found a way to put it in the product. So, that goes to the artistic community that really stepped up or was tapped into to do that.
I started with Todd. Once I jumped ship from Barner, I worked for Todd did like 2 or 3 figures for him. Then immediately went to Marvel. Then I went to work for Todd.
I did the panel about that last year, where it was sort of Todd McFarlane being the patient zero, and then the guys that worked for him, or the Randys and the Phils and the Gene St. Jeans, and that sort of thing just sort of spread out. And there was also kind of a shift too once Todd did that, where the guys that did like the Kenner stuff, God bless them, they weren't fans of toys. They were just guys that went to engineering school or design school and kind of found themselves in that. They weren't like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to work on Star Wars figures. But when that shift started kind of happening, it was the guys that played with Star Wars figures going, that's what I want to do, and that could find themselves, and they go and find like the Phil Ramirez's of the world that can sculpt, great likenesses and the design like Reis does, and just like, oh, we got to find those guys because that's it's sort of everything's been reset from there. That's the new bar.
Power of the Force line, unless there was a problem.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Or even stuff today, like the stuff I see from NECA, and there's amazing stuff on the shelves these days in mass market. At Toys R Us, easy to get, beautiful likenesses, gorgeous paints, innovative paints and stuff like that. And I give McFarlane credit that they got that ball rolling.
Yeah.
Thank the toy gods. We were all smart enough to be like, yeah, we'll do that too. And now it's become like this huge kind of group effort.
Because if you remember, NECA's very first action figure product was Beetlejuice.
Was it really?
And they were
Oh, were they?
They were a disaster. And then Randy came on board, and he was like, we're fixing this. He came out of McFarlane, but just like they hired him away to go, well, we can't keep putting this stuff out. What are we doing wrong? And so Randy kind of, reset that. So yeah, it's those guys that, the Four Horsemen and that sort of thing. Just like these guys that came out of that studio and have a love for this and wanted to do this. So yeah, that's.
my career has been in illustration and design for films and visual effects. So I am kind of a layer away from you guys, but I know what it takes to do what you do. And I wonder if there's an economic model in what you do where, as creators, people that create characters, even if they're under a license, it doesn't matter if it's Batman or it's the Tick or who cares, whatever it is,
Yeah.
that you couldn't be allowed, given the whatever it is, whatever your licensing agreement is, to create characters based on what you feel. You know, I mean, I'm very, the idea that all of us do, everybody in this room is here because they're a creative person. They're curious about creativity.
Right.
They got a bolt of lightning in their head when they were 12 years old, and they've never been the same. We are all that person.
Right.
And yeah, we work for film studios and companies that make, you know, animation figures and all this kind of baloney.
Yeah.
And it seems like there should be an economic model where you guys do what you do with the characters that you love for the companies that you work for, that you share in that thing. You know, again, I'm from the city, so that's.
Is there a question in here?
I'm just saying, I'm asking you, where do you get to express yourself?
Oh, I see, yeah, it's kind of working.
Ah, there you go, you got there.
So tell me, where do you get to do what you do, and you're proud of it, and you get to make money?
That's the last
So-
part. That's the tough part.
Every once in a while.
Yes. I mean, we're coming out of an era where everything was nostalgic. Like, if you look at all the big properties, we have this weird kind of franchise fatigue, I call it. Because, like, if you look at the sales on Transformers and Star Wars, like, they're kind of having to reinvent it a little bit. And they've dominated, and the big retailers, like, their buying patterns is like, big movie, proven franchise. And we had kind of a time where there weren't a lot of original properties. Like, in the 80s and 90s, like, people were pitching all sorts of stuff. And then we hit this black hole of all us 80s dudes were like, yeah, we're gonna make everything we love. And nobody made new stuff. And now I think we're sort of back in that new stuff, that adventure time, that regular show, that we're looking for new properties because we're not getting the return on the stuff that we've been cranking out for 3 decades.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. This lady right here.
I just was wondering, all the toys that you mentioned, has one of you worked on each one of those?
We haven't worked on, like, none of us worked on Star Wars or anything like that, but, yeah.
Well, in a way, not the vintage ones.
Right, yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, Funko has a
Star Wars
Like
license.
through Funko, we get to kind of, play with the licenses that were big back in the day. So designing Star Wars, pop vinyls or something like that, but nothing vintage, you know.
So just one more. Is there any particular toy from the 90s or late 80s that you haven't mentioned that you would say has quite an enduring appeal now?
A toy from the 80s or 90s that has enduring appeal now,
No, I'm sure.
that we haven't mentioned yet.
Turtles is on an upswing again ever since that remake show.
Yeah.
And Turtles have never gone away. You know, we had Next Mutation, which didn't quite go over as well, but I mean, the 2000 series, tons of toys, cartoons. You go away for a generation and your property's done.
Did they stop making the toys in the period that they're not popular?
Sometimes.
It shrinks. It
Yeah.
shrinks to a point where you may think it's gone away,
Yeah.
but in most cases, there's still somebody who's a hardcore fan can find it.
Like, you don't lose a generation.
Yeah, Batman is definitely one of those
Yeah.
evergreens that
Star
goes
Wars.
away, and he'll expand and shrink depending on it. There was a dark time in the late 90s when Hasbro was still the master toy license, where they had gone down to maybe 4 or 5 figures in a season of just Batman in different colors.
Yeah.
That was the thing.
Yeah.
And it was, it was the bit of the desert, but it never stopped. And it's really true. I think you stop once, and then everybody jumps off the boat, and they don't come back.
That little horrible blip of Transformers when their last gasp with G1 was like, we'll make Transformers that don't transform. Then they re-released some old toys in the Beast Wars, and the train was rolling again.
Yeah.
Well, I remember that happened with G.I. Joe. Like, there was a period where G.I. Joe went from Real American Hero to G.I. Joe Extreme and things. And then there was like, every now and then you'd find these really bad little carded, badly painted dudes, and they still went. And then all of a sudden, time for 25th anniversary.
G.I. Joe almost died in the 70s with Vietnam. It turned into an adventure team and then Super Joe because they were like military bad. But weathers that storm and it doesn't go away. It's okay.
Yeah, just wait for the 80s to come around. The military's good.
But they even kind of reset, like what you were talking about after Extreme, when it calmed down, they then went kind of back into 12-inch,
Yeah.
which was kind of the original thing. And then, so just real quick for people that are asking questions, we've got some stuff to give away, so you can come get one, and the lady in the back can come get one. And you're the next question, and you can come get some too.
In the 90s, people were more refined. You could look at someone and you knew what they listened to or what they purchased. And I think as children in the 90s as well, is that, everyone knew what was on television and what other kids are buying, and either you liked it or you didn't. And I was just thinking, now that you're trying to bring these things back, revamp them, or just, trigger all those memories. I think that's great, especially for like my mom. She was in the 90s, she was a child in the 90s, and I've grown up in that way, so I listen to 90s music and all that.
I feel really old right now. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so my mom's 30, and like, but I think it's great for me because although I am already in high school, I'm going to be a little old for this, but I'm okay with that. But I mean, I think there's still people who want it, but isn't it still for older people? Like, do you really think younger
That's a good
people
question.
get involved?
Yeah. Are we just making stuff for
ourselves?
That's old farts? Yeah. Is that what we're doing?
I don't necessarily think so.
I just think like some people do know the turtles, but like it's especially also things like that, like the turtles, they don't know gargoyles,
Right.
And I'm just thinking like these are all great things to bring back, and I wish you would, but I'm also thinking like of the profitable side. So like, I know
so
there's a
are they.
limit to how much you can bring back.
I think what you're talking about is cultural longevity, and not necessarily, and by longevity I don't mean like, how long a movie was in theaters or how long a comic book ran or something like that. I'm talking about like how long did it, for whatever reason, maintain a place in hearts and minds of people as they grew older, and as it kind of through osmosis slipped into the generations below it. Turtles is one of those examples. For some reason, we don't know why. I wish we could bottle it, but it has that cultural longevity. It just won't go away. My 6-year-old nephew is madly in love with turtles, and just like I saw a 6-year-old back in the 90s fall madly in love with turtles. Gargoyles, he might just go, okay. But for some reason, I know it's not a great answer, but just for some reason, some things have that longevity, and some things just don't.
When you zero in on something really important, which is like you said, your mom likes to share the things she likes.
But there,
You walk down the preschool aisle, and it used to be Rescue Heroes and generic preschool stuff. All of a sudden, it's preschool Transformers, it's preschool Iron Man, it's preschool Star Wars. Playmates is an incredible preschool for turtles like that. But those are toys that you're selling to your parents. A 2-year-old does not know to go to the store and go, can't speak. Mom with a 2-year-old who grew up, whatever decade. She sees the properties and the dad sees the properties they grew up on. It's amazing, this kind of mini renaissance of vintage properties in Grand School.
Did your grandma come to Comic Con?
Yes, sir.
I'm not a toy maker, but I've been a toy collector for 60 years. To me, the toys you're talking about never went away. They just went into independent and bootleg productions.
true.
I have collected every one of those kind of things you're talking about through that entire period. They just weren't mass produced.
No, yeah,
They were
and
produced
collectors
by
will have us,
independent toy
yeah,
makers, or they were bootlegged out of Singapore,
sure.
Taiwan.
That's different.
With
That's a whole
None of these people are supporting that.
some little change in the name, but the toys actually never disappeared.
Well, I think you're kind of like, you're like an Uber collector, right? Like, let's be honest, you collect, right? So you're gonna have a different view than a lot of people are gonna have. In the mainstream though, which is when we're referring to things like kind of being booming and then fading out, we're talking more like, if you took a stroll down the aisle at Target, what would be the assessment you get, you know? Like, yeah, I always know there was always like some cool stuff under the radar, you know, but in the mainstream, it's just not that.
Well,
Not
as
that
a collector, you guys kind of mentioned it, but in the 90s, there was nothing bigger than Hot Wheels.
Yeah.
I mean, Hot Wheels.
It's still big. Hot Wheels is not going anywhere.
Hot Wheels just picking
Did you
just
see the giant Hot Wheels booth?
Yeah, yeah.
Hot Wheels is the only product that's like, I don't know, they're increasing price. Like action figures, we used to buy Marvel Legends for like $8, $7, and now we're like, oh, $25 for a 7-inch figure. I'll pay that.
Yeah.
Hot Wheels went from what, 99 cents to like $2.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. You know?
Unless it's licensed like cars, and then it's
But you
$5.
can have those kind of fancy ones with core product, great price point.
They have,
Beatable.
Do you have a question?
Yes, I
Yes,
do.
what's your question?
Um,
Pretty lady in the back.
I would like to know what everyone on the panels, their favorite toy is from that they have now, and if they have a white whale that they are still hunting for, and what is it? What are your favorite toy, your favorite possession, and your white whale?
My white whale still is, my favorite show growing up was The Greatest American Hero. Believe it or not. And the Migo Volkswagen set, yeah, I still
I know where one is. You got the pin.
Yeah? But my favorite thing, golly, I don't know. One thing that I have that's pretty cool, that's just because, you know, I have an action figure site and I know the right people. I have the original Marvel Legend resin Hulk. That was the thing that Jesse showed that one year at Toy Fair, saying Marvel Legends are coming.
The first series one?
Yeah,
I didn't.
I know. And it's, I have
Get him to sign it.
Phil has signed one of the feet and Eddie signed the other.
That's right.
So that might be my favorite thing. How about
White whale. Right now it's a Star Wars Black Jabba the Hutt. Thanks, Adam. I've been pretty fortunate to score a lot of good stuff. I don't know if I have a major white whale, but I have 3 super prized toys at home. One is my original Raiding Shogun Warrior. Yeah, I love him dearly to this day. And the 8-inch Migo Conan the Barbarian, which it's silly looking, but I love it. And yeah, with the rooted hair and his fuzzy panties on. And then I also is my blue snaggletooth that was given to me by one of my friends, Eric Stepmeyer, and giving him a shout out. He gave me that. I still just walk by that thing every now and then.
Yeah.
But no white whales.
All right.
Oh, bad, so I can't pick anything.
Are you serious? Come on.
I'm trying to so many whales, so I can't really pick a favorite right now. Well, all right.
I mean, I unfortunately had lost most of my toys along my way, whether my mom would sneak in and donate them to people or throw them out or whatever it would be. So I had favorites as a child, and my favorite right now that I have is probably the anti-monitor from Mattel from their 3 3/4 inch Infinite Heroes line from a few years back. They made only 5 or 6 of them at the time, and they gifted one to DC, and I kind of moved it from New York to California. So it sits in my office, even though it's not really mine. I count it as like mine.
All right.
And then from a white whale point of view, it's not so much white whale because I try not to go crazy collecting anymore. I try and, just manage that to certain degrees. But I get a weird, pain in my heart whenever I see the Hall of Justice from Superpowers.
Sure.
And whenever I see any of the Marvel Secret Wars figures.
Okay.
It hurts.
Word.
I hear you. I feel you.
No white whale, prized possessions, Shogun Warrior, Metal Guy King,
Right on.
and then just my all-time favorite sculpt as a kid. I just love it. It looks so different from all the other figures. Hammerhead. No, Hammerhead from Star Wars, the original Hammerhead sculpture.
Yeah.
Yep, blue leotard.
Who is
Yeah,
wearing
it's
it?
his mouth.
Oh, is it really?
And so one of the folds is actually his mouth. So on the back card and the thing, you read about it, and he eats from nobody else knows this.
I do know, like I said, somebody won the nerd award.
All right, we'll get
Here, you want to scribble down?
My favorite toy is probably Masters of the Universe Classic Zodak.
Oh.
He was my favorite He-Man figure as a kid because I was like, he's like a space barbarian with fish hands and feet and a hairy chest. And that hair wasn't painted, so it was like flesh hair. It just freaked me out. I love that guy. And so when the Four Horsemen did the updated one, people were like, that's the dumbest He-Man figure. It's a bunch of recycled parts with a weird head. And I'm like, I love that figure. I don't figure enough that's the reason I have a toy company. I made, because he had like a dinky little water gun looking thing. Yeah, I was like, that is balls. I'm going to make him a sword. So back then I was casting resin. I didn't make him a sword. I casted clear resin with glitter in it. I'm like, this is awesome sword. My buddies are like, dude, make me one. I'm like, okay. And then people on the message boards are like, we want one. Can we buy one? And I'm like, on my balcony, casting resin. And I'm like, this is bull crap. I'm going to die of cancer. So I started a toy company. And one of the first products, we did a modular weapon set. And one of the weapons was a sword for Zodak. So he's always, since the 80s to kind of the revival of the Horsemen, this artistic version to inspire me enough to make my own company that, we make our own characters now. We have our own action figure line. But a lot of it has to do with that one weird little Mattel character that the Horsemen then, took from being like an afterthought product design down to a space barbarian, whatever. They are, put the artistic side to it. It inspired me. So, I've always loved that with that.
Nice. This lady right here.
When I was a girl in the 90s, I remember there was this easy bake trend where there was easy bake oven, creepy crawlers, and then I can't remember what this last one was called. But I remember seeing commercials for it, and it was basically the same premise as creepy crawlers, only there were these little metal, I guess, I don't know what material it was made out of. It was metal, it was maybe aluminum where it melted easy.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I asked my mom, Mom, I want this, and she was like, no. And I was like, oh, I might. And it's the same thing, oh, I don't have money. Oh, here's the Cheon, or those are for boys. And later on I found out my mom's friend from work bought her son the same thing, and he burned himself so bad. He had to be sent to the hospital because it was basically he thought the metal was melted and he got it and he did this on his hand. It was just liquid metal in his hand.
Who thought of that? Who was like, hey, you know what? Molten metal.
You know what kids love for kids.
And then somebody was like, make it happen.
My question is,
Good one, Johnson.
what is your dangerous and or recall toy?
Oh.
Can I go first? I was this is dark, really dark.
Really, from you, Phil?
Yeah. I sculpted, it was a venom, it was like a creature of the Black Lagoon venom, and some kid was jumping on the bed with it, and he tore his cheek open. So I felt responsible.
Well, I'm old enough that I remember a time when, the Battlestar Galactica on ships didn't have giant rubber stoppers on the missiles because some kid choked on it and ruined it for the rest of us.
Well, not only did he ruin that, he ruined rocket firing Boba Fett.
Rocket firing Boba Fett.
We all got Boba Fett with a rocket glued in it.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. This gentleman right here.
Well, a lot of discussion of action figures, but one of the toy lines I remember in the 90s being very collectible briefly and very kind of frenzy about collecting was the micro machines.
Oh, yeah.
Battle on 5 micro machines. There was Star Trek. And even tiny niche markets got a run of micro machines.
Yeah.
Like really, and then they're gone. I think there might be still a shadow collector world for them, but
It's funny you say that.
because I don't see any equivalent nowadays, but they were dominant at Toys R Us,
Sure,
Target,
yeah.
and elsewhere.
We were just having some discussions back at the office about specifically that line, and we had this really interesting debate because I have this weird love-hate with that, because I used to, especially the Star Wars micro, worlds that they had, I loved the sense of having these environments that you couldn't get elsewhere that regular places didn't have, and I hated they were so small that I would lose everything, so it was this weird love-hate thing, but we were talking as the 90s are coming back about that being more in fashion, and the idea of obviously people cutting costs and things getting a little bit easier and all, like bringing it down in size and scale. So, there may be things coming down the line that might be a little bit related.
I did want to follow up comment on the whole scale disparity thing.
Yeah.
This goes back to the 70s. Major Matt Mason versus Barbie. My sisters always wanted to play.
Sure.
Barbie had a good 4 inches on Major Matt Mason.
Yeah.
Matt Mason liked big girls. Nothing wrong with that, brother.
Well, I think we're actually out of time, unfortunately. We can sit here and talk all night. It's been so fun. And Kevin didn't get to tell his Teddy Ruxpin story. I'm so upset. Can you do that just really quick? Just tell Teddy Ruxpin and we'll be out.
Just really quick, we were saying about how I was obsessed with toys. My dad didn't let me have toys, and one of the ways I got around it was by taking a job at this retail place that also had a toy department, and they put me in the register by the toy area. So one of the things I had to do was go check it out to make sure at the end of the night that all the toys were in place, blah, blah, blah. So I was obsessed with Teddy Ruxpin, way too old. I had a job at this point, I'm like 16, but I was like, Teddy Ruxpin, I love you so much. So walking down the aisle, and there's a Teddy Ruxpin there, and do not tell anybody else I did this, but I pretended that the box was damaged. I kind of ran up to it and broke it. So then I'd be like, oh, it's broken, so let me open them the rest of the way. So I took them out and sat them on the register with me, and I used to put different cassette tapes in them during the holidays and put little hats and dress them up. It was ridiculous, and I was 16 at this time. So I did it so much that I actually sold 2 or 3 of the Teddy Ruxpins because people in the restaurant would be like, that's so cute, let me sell them. They're like, oh, here, good one. Until one lady came back and returned one, and she was like, it's not singing the same songs that you had. And I'm like, oh, you just put a different tape in it. It turned out horribly, I'm just saying.
And on that